My daughter said I was no longer invited to her wedding a few hours to the moment I had been waiting for. I didn't react immediately. I calmly drove back home. But what happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Ruth Baum from London. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I used to think a wedding was the reward for surviving fatherhood. Not the big, dramatic kind of reward, the public applause or the tearful thanks, but something quieter. A nod, a moment, a look across the room from your daughter that says, "You did all right, Dad." I wasn't chasing a spotlight. I just wanted to feel like I had made it to the end of something that mattered. And for years, I told myself that moment would come on the day she walked down the aisle. All I ever wanted was to be standing there when she turned to see me, not as an obligation or a name on the seating chart, but as her father, as someone who had earned that place beside her. When she got engaged, I didn't hesitate. I congratulated her. I hugged her. I told her I was proud. But inside, I was already worrying about the numbers. She'd picked a man with family money and expectations stitched into every corner of his life. His parents sent her designer gifts, flew her out for weekend getaways, and spoke in polished tones that made my working man vocabulary feel like a busted engine sputtering in a luxury showroom. Still, she was my girl. And if she wanted a fairy tale, I'd build it brick by brick. I didn't care if I had to fake the castle. I used one of my smaller companies, a rental business I'd owned quietly for years, to set up a fabricated sweepstakes. A luxury wedding sponsorship, fully funded, awarded through an online bridal magazine I also created just for the ruse. I hired a third party to notify her. She came to me breathless, squealing with joy, waving the email like she'd just hit the jackpot. I smiled, acted surprised, and told her she deserved it. I was the silent sponsor, the hidden hand, the ghost who paid for everything and stayed invisible. That felt safer, cleaner. If I made it about me, she'd push back. But if it was magic, if it was chance, she'd take it. And she did. I watched from the edges of her planning process. She let me know things only when it benefited her. A menu update here, a venue tour there. She once asked me if I knew any contractors who could speed up the stage platform design. I nodded, made a call, and had it done in a week. She never asked how I pulled it off. And I never told her it came from the same man she no longer invited to brunches with her future in-laws. I convinced myself this was love, giving without being seen, helping without being thanked. But if I'm honest, I was just afraid. Afraid that if I reminded her who I really was, where I came from, she'd keep me further away. The morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn. My suit was already laid out, pressed and perfect. Navy, with a subtle paisley lining I'd chosen because it reminded me of her childhood drawings. I hadn't slept much the night before. My mind had been racing with lists and logistics. I arrived at the venue 5 hours before the ceremony, just to double-check the details. The florist was already unloading. The string quartet had arrived. Staff moved like clockwork, each of them unaware that the man in the navy suit leaning by the main entrance was the one who signed every invisible check. I did one last walkthrough, then stepped into the private lounge area where the planner was organizing gift bags. She looked up and smiled. "Everything's smooth, Mr. Harlan." Not a hiccup. I nodded. I wasn't there as a guest, not yet. I was still playing the role of the shadow sponsor. And once things were in place, I figured I'd slip into my seat quietly like any other proud father. Maybe they'd finally look at me, her fiancé's parents, maybe even she would, and realize I wasn't so out of place after all, that I'd earned a seat at their table, even if I didn't speak their language. After a final nod to the planner, I stepped outside into the fresh morning air. I stood by the valet circle, watching as early vendors arrived and deliveries stacked neatly under the service awning. The day was beautiful, the sky clear, and for once, I let myself believe I had done something right, that I would watch my daughter shine, and she'd know, somehow, that I had built this dream for her. Even if she never learned the truth, maybe she'd feel it, that invisible current between a father's love and a daughter's joy. That's when my phone buzzed. I glanced down casually, expecting a scheduling update or maybe a text from one of the vendors. But it was from her. My daughter. The bride. Her name blinking on the screen made my chest tighten, not with dread, but with hope. I thought, maybe she wants to see me before the ceremony. Maybe she wants a moment. A thank you. A hug. I unlocked the screen and read the message. Once. Twice. And then I just stood there, blinking at the words like they might rearrange themselves into something softer. But they didn't. Everything slowed. The laughter of arriving guests in the distance faded. The hum of the outdoor heaters, the light clink of silverware from the prep tables, it all went quiet. My hand tightened around the phone. My breath caught in my throat. And still, I didn't move. I didn't react. I just read it again, the words now etched into my bones like scars. And in that instant, everything changed. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I didn't even respond. I simply turned, stepped off the marble path, and began walking back toward the parking lot, my shadow long against the sunlight. Something had snapped. I just didn't know yet what it would cost. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. My car sat in the parking lot like a stranger I didn't want to face. I leaned against the hood for a long while, the sun climbing higher behind the venue I had quietly paid for. I kept staring at my phone, not because I was waiting for another message, but because I wasn't. That one text, sitting there like a bullet in my inbox, had told me everything I needed to know. Still, I kept hoping it would vanish. Or maybe be followed by a second one that said, "Sorry, Dad. That wasn't for you." But it didn't come. Just that one message. A digital execution. Her words had been simple. Cold. "Dad, please don't come. My in-laws don't want you around. They said it should only be for the elites, and you're not on that list. Please understand. I'll explain later." As if there was anything left to explain. As if there was a version of this where I would shrug it off and say, "Okay, sweetie. Have a great day." I tried to read between the lines, tried to pretend she had been forced into saying it. But the truth was, she could have stood up for me. She could have said, "If my father's not welcome, then neither am I." But she didn't. She agreed with them. She sent the text. And she let it stand. I got into the car eventually, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there with the air conditioning off and the windows up, sweat beginning to bead at the back of my neck. I remembered something stupid, her kindergarten graduation. She'd worn this ridiculous construction paper crown, and when she got to the podium, she grabbed the mic and yelled, "My daddy's the best daddy in the world." The whole auditorium laughed, and I'd cried in front of everyone like an idiot. I held on to that moment for years, used it like armor every time she pulled away. And now here I was, alone in a car, uninvited to the very life I built for her. I drove slowly, not because of traffic or caution, because I was stalling. Part of me still expected a phone call, a knock on the window, something. I passed by a florist van on the way out. I recognized the company, my company, under a name she didn't know I owned. They were bringing in peonies and calla lilies, her favorites. I'd approved every order, signed every invoice. Now I was leaving before I could even see her walk down the aisle. Not because I was running late, but because I wasn't welcome. At home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the driveway, staring at the front steps like they belonged to someone else. My hands trembled slightly as I turned off the ignition. This wasn't grief. It wasn't even anger, not yet. It was something more hollow. A strange, echoing silence in the chest. A disconnection, like someone had unplugged me from the world. I didn't know what to do next. I had spent months preparing for this day, poring over details, arranging vendors, managing timelines. And now I was just done. Not needed. Not invited. Inside, the air felt colder than usual. I shrugged off my jacket, tossed it over the back of the couch, and sat down without turning on the lights. I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. I needed to understand how we had gotten here. When had I become an embarrassment? Was it when I showed up to her college orientation in my work boots? When I asked too many questions at the dinner with her fiancé's parents? Or had it always been there? This quiet shame she carried about where she came from? There had been signs. Moments I had chosen to ignore. Like the time she introduced me at a fundraising gala as the man who taught me how to work hard, instead of just my dad. Or the way she winced when I laughed too loud at the engagement party. Or how her fiancé's mother once said, "It's sweet how involved you've been with the wedding." As if I was some overeager handyman, not the architect. I had seen it all. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. And yet, I wasn't angry at her. Not fully. I was angry at myself for thinking money could buy me a place at a table they'd already decided I wasn't fit for. For believing that if I just stayed quiet, stayed useful, I'd be rewarded with presents. But love doesn't work that way. Not real love. And respect sure as hell doesn't. You either have a seat or you don't. And I never did. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, staring out at the street as if the answers might stroll by. I thought about my own father, how he worked the same steel job for 30 years, came home every day smelling like rust and grease, and never once apologized for it. He wasn't elite, but he was present. He showed up. And I had sworn to do the same for my daughter. But apparently showing up wasn't enough anymore. Not when your boots leave dirt on their marble floors. My phone buzzed again. An alert from the wedding planner confirming the final setup had been completed. The ceremony was less than 2 hours away. I was supposed to be in the third row, right aisle, seat 6. I had picked that spot myself. From there, I could have seen everything. Her dress, her smile, the way she looked at her groom. Now, that seat would be filled by someone who belonged. Someone on the list. I set the phone down slowly, careful not to let it slip from my fingers. I stared at it for a long time, half hoping it would buzz again. Not from the planner, not from a vendor, but from her. Something, anything. But all I got was silence. And somewhere in that silence, a thought formed. A new kind of clarity. If I wasn't good enough to sit among the people she wanted to impress, then maybe I wasn't supposed to be a silent sponsor either. Maybe it was time to stop paying for a seat I was never allowed to use. But I didn't move. Not yet. I just sat there in the half-light of my quiet house, the wedding unraveling in my mind before it ever began. I didn't plan it. Not really. There wasn't some dramatic moment where I stood up and yelled, "Enough." No, it happened slowly, like a tide turning, one quiet inch at a time, until suddenly everything was underwater. I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the hardwood floor beneath my feet, my glass of water still full, untouched. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed in from all sides, the kind that made you feel like even the walls were holding their breath. I thought of texting her back, thought of saying, "This must be a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. That was the problem. It was a decision, and it was mine to answer. My laptop sat on the dining table like it had been waiting for me. When I opened it, the glow of the screen felt intrusive, too bright for how small I suddenly felt. I typed in the admin credentials for the shell company that had sponsored the wedding. I had set it all up months ago, carefully built aliases, contracts under dummy names, prepaid vendor deposits staggered to clear just before the ceremony began. It was efficient, seamless, invisible, all of it designed to protect her from the truth and protect me from the sting of being excluded. Until now, I scrolled through the payment schedule. Everything was set to process in about 45 minutes. The florist, the caterers, the lighting crew, the stage company, the decorator who imported linens from Italy because her Pinterest board said the standard ones looked cheap. I had paid for custom monogram menus, for artisanal bread that had to be flown in, for a harpist during cocktail hour. Not because I cared about any of it. I cared about her feeling like her wedding day was exactly what she'd imagined. Even if it wasn't with the man I would have chosen. Even if it meant staying hidden behind the curtain. And now she had drawn a different kind of curtain. One that shut me out. The first payment I canceled was the band. A smooth jazz trio she picked because the groom's father hated jazz, and she thought it would be funny. They were good guys. I had met them during rehearsal. I felt a little guilty, but not enough to stop. One click, then another. The floral deposit reversal took slightly longer. Wire transfer protocol required a manual verification. I entered the code without hesitation. Within 10 minutes, over $30,000 in scheduled payments had been reversed or frozen. My phone lit up as confirmation emails started rolling in. One vendor called, the coordinator for the lighting crew. "Sir, I just got a payment denial. Has the event been canceled?" I could hear the panic in his voice. Weddings were their bread and butter. A last-minute dropout meant money lost. I kept my voice calm. "No, the the event's still on. But the sponsor pulled out. A pause. Then, carefully, he asked, "Will someone else be handling payment?" I looked out the window, watching the wind stir the branches. "Not my concern anymore," I said. And I meant it. Just as I closed the laptop, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a vendor. It was Carla, my sister. She rarely called twice in one day unless something serious had happened. I answered with a sigh already in my chest. "You okay?" she asked, skipping hello. I told her. The text. The rejection. The quiet drive home. There was a long pause on the line. "She actually said that? That you're not on the list?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Word for word," I said. "Her in-laws didn't want me there, and she went along with it." I could hear her seething. That girl has lost her damn mind. I didn't argue. But I also didn't let her take all the blame. She didn't get like this on her own. I let her build a world where I didn't fit. All I ever did was make myself smaller, quieter, so she could grow into whatever this is. "No," Carla snapped. "You gave her everything. There's a difference." And she chose not to see it. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because hearing it out loud made it more real. I told Carla what I had done. The cancellations. The withdrawals. The financial rug pull that was still unfolding like a slow domino collapse. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "Good. About damn time someone held her accountable." "It's not revenge," I said. "It's alignment." She laughed. Not unkindly. "Call it what you want. But don't you dare feel bad about it." The call ended shortly after, and I sat in the hush that followed, feeling the truth of her words settle over me like a new coat of skin. I didn't feel bad. Not yet. Maybe I would later. But in that moment, I felt clear, like the air after a storm. Another buzz. This time, a voicemail alert. She had called. I hadn't even noticed the phone ring. I pressed play. Her voice was tight, the edges frayed. "Dad? I don't know what's happening. The planner just told me that the sponsor pulled out. Vendors are saying payments didn't go through. Are you okay? Do you know anything about this? Please call me." The message ended with a whimper. A whimper I used to run toward without hesitation. Not this time. Because here's the thing. For years, I had shown up every time she needed something. Money, advice, a last-minute fix. I was the emergency brake on her life. And she used me like one. But brakes were down. Even the best ones. Especially when they're never thanked. And now? Now she had pulled the final thread. I scrolled through the messages again. Vendors confirming cancellations. Automated fraud alerts checking if I intended to reverse such large sums. I did. I confirmed each one with the precision of a man who had finally stopped waiting for someone else to value him. Then I stood up, closed the laptop, sat back down. My phone vibrated again, another call. Her name on the screen. This time, I answered. Her voice came through the line cracked and trembling, like glass under pressure. "Dad? What's going on? Please, tell me you didn't have anything to do with this." I stayed silent for a moment, letting the question hang. She must have known. Some part of her had to recognize the shape of the storm. I could hear the muffled chaos behind her, voices rising, a woman's sharp tone, probably the wedding planner, and somewhere in the distance, a man barking about timelines and contracts. She was in the center of it now, and for the first time, she wasn't in control. "You're telling me your in-laws, the people who wanted me gone, can't handle a little financial fallout?" I asked, my voice level, not cruel but not kind either. Just flat. She gasped. That sound. It wasn't the cry of a child who scraped her knee or the complaint of a bride inconvenienced. It was panic. Real, guttural panic. "Wait, what are you saying?" "It was you," she whispered, as if the words might catch fire. I didn't answer, not directly. I let silence answer for me. She filled the void quickly. "Dad, please. This is my wedding. Everyone's here. Nothing's set up. The decorator walked out. The cake's not delivered. Even the valet crew is gone. This is a disaster." I pictured her standing there in full makeup and a $1,000 dress, surrounded by the collapse of a fantasy. And then I remembered the text she sent just a few hours ago. Short, sharp, dismissive. "Please don't come. My in-laws said it's for the elites, and you're not on that list." That wasn't an accident. That was a choice. And choices come with consequences. "I warned you a long time ago," I said. The people you stand beside determine the people you push away. She was crying now, not sobbing. This was different. These were quiet, confused tears, the kind that come from realizing you built your dream on a foundation that didn't belong to you. I didn't know. I didn't know it was you, she said softly. No, I said. But you knew who I was. And you decided that wasn't good enough. There was a pause, the kind that aches. I imagined her looking around the chaos, mascara smudging, the guests murmuring behind her. I imagined her alone in a crowd she had once proudly chosen over me. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. Then why did you? That silenced her. I could hear the wind through her phone's speaker, a flap of fabric, distant voices arguing. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said, and the words crumpled under their own weight. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, my throat dry. There was a time I would have driven back without hesitation. Would have made a call, thrown money at the problem, played the hero. That time was gone. Something in me had shifted. Not broken, just settled. I had always assumed fatherhood was about endless giving. But maybe it was also about knowing when to stop. You made your choice, I said. Now you get to sit with it. You don't understand, she started, but I cut her off gently. No, I said. You don't. You asked me not to come. You made it clear I didn't belong. So I left, and I took everything I brought with me. The call ended soon after. Not with a fight, not with a slam. Just a quiet click. And then it was over. I stared at the screen for a long time, her name still visible in the call log, glowing like an afterthought. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Deeply, bone-wearily tired. A few minutes later, my sister Carla texted. Just one sentence. People are talking. What happened? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I poured myself a drink. Not to celebrate, not to drown, but just to mark the moment. I stood by the window, sipping slowly, and watched the late afternoon light stretch across the street like the end of a performance. Somewhere not far from me, a wedding was imploding in slow motion. I wondered what the guests thought. Were they blaming the vendors? Whispering about sabotage? Or had someone already figured it out? It didn't matter. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from one of the vendors I had worked with for years. Are you sure you want to go through with the full pullout? We can try to salvage some of it. I stared at the message, then replied. She asked me not to be part of her day. So I'm honoring that. Short, clear, final. I walked out to the porch, letting the screen door shut behind me with a soft thud. I sat in the same chair I used to rock her to sleep in when she had colic, and I was too broke to afford a better crib. I remembered her tiny fists gripping my thumb, her laugh when I made silly faces, her voice singing off-key in the backseat during road trips. I had given her everything, and for a long time, I thought that was enough. But here's the truth no one tells you about fatherhood. It's not about what you give. It's about what they remember, and what they forget. And today, she forgot me. By the time the sun had fully dipped behind the horizon, the wedding was no longer a private unraveling. It was a public spectacle. I didn't have to search for the updates. They came to me. Carla texted again, this time with a screenshot. Someone at the venue had posted a blurry video of the chaotic setup being torn down, captioned, "Vendors walked out mid-wedding. What is happening?" In the background, a woman could be heard yelling, and though her voice was distant, I recognized it. My daughter. It wasn't the voice of a bride. It was the voice of someone watching a perfect image crumble in real time. The comments were swift and brutal. Strangers speculated everything from bankruptcy to sabotage. They must have stiffed the planners. Probably drama with the sponsor. I heard the groom's family pulled out at the last minute. Every guess was wrong. But every guess was also right in its own way, because the truth was worse. The truth wasn't financial. It wasn't logistical. It was emotional. A father walked away, and he took the scaffolding with him. I didn't reply to Carla's message. There was nothing to say. She knew me well enough to guess the whole story by now, and she didn't push. But she wasn't the only one. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at my door. A heavy, impatient rhythm. I opened it slowly, already knowing who it would be. Marcus, my daughter's godfather and my oldest friend, stood there in slacks and a dress shirt, his tie undone, face flushed with disbelief. "You pulled the damn plug," he said without preamble. "On the day of..." I didn't move. I just nodded once and stepped aside so he could come in. He walked in with that energy of someone who didn't know if they were here to fight or understand. She told me what happened. Not all of it, obviously, but enough. Said the vendors disappeared. The cake never arrived. Even the photographer left halfway through. She asked me not to be part of her day, I said, sitting down. So I honored her request. Marcus exhaled loudly, pacing near the bookshelf. You couldn't have waited until after? Let her have the day, then confront her. I met his eyes. She didn't let me have the day. Why should I let her pretend everything was fine? He stopped pacing. He looked at me for a long moment, the anger in his face softening into something closer to sadness. She messed up, no question, but you raised her better than this. I raised her to value loyalty and love, I said. She valued appearances and shame. That's not on me anymore. He sat across from me, the room heavy with the kind of silence that only comes after long friendships stretch too far. You know this is going to haunt her, right? What you did. I nodded. Maybe that's what it takes for her to remember who built her world. He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He just sat back, and we both stared at the floor like it could offer answers. After he left, I stepped out onto the porch again, the night air cool against my skin. Across the street, porch lights flickered on. A neighbor walked her dog. Normalcy hummed along, indifferent to the emotional earthquake still rumbling inside me. That's the thing about these moments. Your world shatters, but the world keeps moving. It doesn't pause. It doesn't flinch. It just keeps going, and you either keep up or get buried. Later that night, I got another text. This one from her. My daughter. Was it you? Please just tell me the truth. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. There was so much I could say, so many versions of the truth I could offer, but I knew she didn't want the whole story. She wanted confirmation. She wanted to know whether the ghost behind her dream had turned into the architect of its collapse. I opened a blank note on my phone instead, wrote the message I wanted to send, but didn't. A full confession. A final explanation. I told her about the fake sweepstakes, the company I used, the vendors I met, the bills I paid in silence. I reminded her of the nights I stayed up comparing quotes for imported candles because she once mentioned the venue smelled too plain. I wrote about the way I stood outside that morning, watching everything come together, proud like I'd built the whole thing with my bare hands. And then I wrote about the text, how it felt, how it stripped everything away. I told her I had never expected her to pay me back, never needed public praise, but I had expected, hoped, for basic respect, for a chair, a seat, a moment. I ended it with this. You can't ask someone to disappear quietly and then be surprised when they take their love with them. I didn't send it. Instead, I replied with only this. Yes. It was me. She didn't respond. The next morning was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural, like the silence was pretending not to be tense. I woke early, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body had grown used to years of early risings. Alarm or no alarm, grief or no grief. The house was still, light spilling in through the blinds like a calm aftershock. I didn't check my phone right away. I didn't need to. I already knew there would be no response. And in a strange way, that was its own kind of reply. Silence wasn't always emptiness. Sometimes it was someone's inability to face what they couldn't undo. I made coffee the way I always did. 2 scoops, no sugar, black. I sat at the kitchen table where she used to eat her cereal every morning before school. I could still picture her tiny hands gripping the spoon, still hear the sound of cartoons playing in the background while I packed her lunch. Those memories weren't painful. Not yet. They were soft-edged, dulled by time, and dusted with something like warmth. But then my mind jumped, leapt, really, to yesterday. The way her voice broke on the phone. The way she begged. And I remembered something far colder. Her text, "You're not on the list." Those 5 words had done something irreversible. They had sliced through years of sacrifice, of late-night pickups and tuition payments, of scraped knees and midnight tears and handwritten birthday cards she stopped giving once she turned 21. In that moment, she didn't just remove me from the wedding. She removed me from her narrative. And that kind of cut doesn't bleed right away. It bleeds slow, quiet, constant. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing again. This time, not from her, but from the world around her. A distant cousin who'd heard from another guest that the wedding imploded. An old friend asking what the hell happened. Even a former employee who saw a trending post and suspected I had something to do with it. I didn't reply to any of them. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't feel obligated to explain myself anymore. I had always believed that love meant being willing to suffer quietly. That a good father was like a foundation, buried, invisible, only noticed when things cracked. But yesterday taught me something different. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's servitude. And I was done being invisible. Around noon, Carla dropped by. She didn't call first, just showed up with 2 large iced teas and a look that told me she already knew what she needed to know. She sat across from me on the porch and passed me a drink like we were sharing a moment between battlefield lulls. "She hasn't called you?" she asked. "Nope," I said, taking a sip. "Just that one text asking if it was me." I answered. "That was it." She nodded slowly. "I talked to Marcus. He said the whole thing collapsed within an hour. Vendors packed up. Guests started leaving. Groom's parents were livid." "I'm sure they were," I said. "Apparently the groom kept trying to salvage it," she continued. "But once the music stopped and people started tweeting, there was no saving face. They tried to play it off like a technical failure, but guests were too nosy." "Good," I said flatly. "Let them sit in the truth." Carla watched me for a long second. "You don't regret it?" I shook my head. "Not for a second." She leaned back, folding her arms. "She will. Maybe not today, but one day." "I hope she does," I said. "But if she doesn't, I'll be okay too." We sat in companionable silence, the kind only siblings can share after the emotional dust has settled. When she left, she hugged me a little tighter than usual, said she was proud of me, and I believed her. Later that night, I finally opened my laptop again. Not to reverse anything, not to explain, just to look. I opened the folder I had labeled Wedding Assets and scrolled through the receipts, the designs, the carefully crafted contracts. I found a PDF of her seating chart, the original one I had helped draft before she started editing it behind my back. My name had been there once. Right side aisle. Row 3. Deleted. I hovered over the folder for a long moment. Then I right-clicked and hit delete. No hesitation. No ceremony. Gone. Afterward, I drove out to a quiet overlook about 20 minutes from town. It was a spot I used to take her when she was a kid, back when she needed long drives to fall asleep. She'd lean her head against the window and ask questions about the stars. I parked, rolled down the windows, and just listened. Crickets. The breeze. The echo of something old dying quietly. She may never call again. She may never apologize. And I had to accept that. But I had drawn a line. Not out of spite. Out of love, for myself. I had been erased, and I'd responded not with rage, but with clarity. I had given her everything I could, and when I wasn't enough for her world, I took what I'd given and walked away. Not because I wanted to ruin her, but because I refused to be used. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect your peace, you know this kind of heartbreak. Do you think the father was right to pull the plug? Or should he have stayed silent for her big day? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story hits you deep, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's learned the hard way that sometimes love needs boundaries. See you soon in the next story.